Okay, this will be part 3 of our little review for ASP.NET C#. And make sure you watch the other 2 parts first because we continue where we left off the last time. And so now we're going to work on creating a Teams controller. And we'll write the methods in that Teams controller that will allow us to show all the teams that we have, add a team, and edit a team, and delete a team. So let's go ahead and move forward with that. Next thing I want to do then is I want to go to my controllers, and I want to right mouse click and choose Add Controller. And we're going to go ahead and do an empty controller again. By the way, if I chose any of these others, this would allow us to create controllers and views. So this would create a controller and view, meaning it would have the C# code and the HTML code for the view. So it's pretty exciting that we can use these type of things to help us write views and controllers. So let's go ahead and do an empty one though, and we'll click Add. And this one is going to be called Teams Controller. Now we said Teams because over here in our code we called it Teams. We made it plural. Let's just click Add. It will make our brand new controller for us, and by default it makes an index method. And we really don't need that index method. We can leave it, we can use it. But what it does point out is that you can have an index method in every controller that you want. And the reason you can do that is because it's a method inside of a class. So this method, index, is inside the home controller class. This method, index, is inside the Teams controller class. So let's come over here and let's just change this method name. We don't really want that, but we want to use the show teams. I think that was the method over here in our index view we said we wanted to do. The show teams method in the Teams controller. So that will be our show teams. And what we want this to do for us is we want it to show us a list of all the teams that we have. Now what we want to do is we want to create a list object that's going to be visible throughout the entire project. And the way we can do that is inside of this class. Notice I'm inside of the class, not outside of it. Inside the class I can say public, so it's visible everywhere. Static, meaning I don't have to create an object of type Teams controller to access this variable. And then we'll say that it's going to be a list data structure. So it's like an array, but it's expandable, and we can add items and delete items and search and a whole bunch of great things we can do with it. And we want to specify the data type. You could do a string, an int, a char, anything like that. But we actually want this list to hold a list of teams in our model. See the team class right there? That's the name of the class. So right here we could just say the word team. And so that's going to hold team objects inside of this list. So it'll create team objects from the model. And remember, here's what the team object looked like. It had a team code and a team name. So back over here, every time we add an object to this list, it'll have a team name and that team code. We need to give it a name. I'm going to call mine LST. That's an L, not the number 1. LS team. And then we'll call it team, list team, equal to a new object of type list team. And then you have to say parenthesis, because we're actually going to call the constructor that the system creates for us. Not us, but the constructor. I'm sorry, we don't make this constructor, the system does. We don't see it. That's fine. Notice we're getting an error, and it says, I don't know who team is. And that's because you have to click on this and say, let's use the midterm review models folder. If you use the midterm models folder, which is right here, that now gives you access to these classes. So this line we just created, the public static list team, the variable name, the actual object is going to hold a list of team objects for us. And it's going to be visible throughout the entire project. Now that we have that, let's come over here to our Show Teams. And in our Show Teams method, right mouse click and choose Add View. We're going to leave it as Show Teams, but this time, instead of saying an empty without model, we want to attach it to the model that we want to work with, but it's also going to be a list view, meaning it's going to go out to that list or that list of objects of teams and create all the HTML code for us to show all of those objects. Quite exciting that ASP.NET will do that for you. We want to attach it to a model, and we want to attach this to the team model. Make sure the layout page is still checked and click Add. Let's see what it does. It now created all the HTML for us to work with the list of objects. Don't worry about the red marks, they'll disappear in just a minute. This says this view is attached to, that's Razor, a model that is a collection, that's what IEnumerable is, a collection or an iteration of team objects in the models folder in the midterm review folder. So this will now be a list of team objects. Let's see what else we have. Created an action link for us called Create New. That will be the underlying text. And if you ever click on it, it's going to go to the create method in the current controller, which is the Teams controller. It also creates a table row, a table header, and it says go out and use some HTML helpers and grab the display name for the model team code. So it goes out to the model and looks and see if it has an attribute for the team code, which in our model for team, we don't have an attribute for display name, so it's just going to use the team name as a label for the header. Now this is called a lambda expression. And the lambda expression says use the model associated with the view, and let's look at the model team code attribute. And when I go and run this, it'll make more sense to you. And then it says do a new table header, and let's go create a display for the team name of the model. Now that we've done the headers, let's go and for each item in the model, meaning for every record in our model, let's grab it one at a time, which is a list of objects, and put that object inside of this variable. You don't have to call this item, that's the default. I could have called it Flapjack, Spanky, Darla, Alfalfa, Colorado Rockies, anything I wanted. But by default, ASP.NET will call it item. I say use the default so you don't have to change the code. So for every item or object in the model, let's go create a new table row and a table description and display the information for the team code, and then do the information for the team name, and then create an HTML action link for edit, details, and delete. We aren't going to need all of these, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that one. So we're going to see two hrefs, one for edit and one for delete. We'll talk about those in just a minute. Let's go ahead and save this. Go back to index and let's just run it and see what it looks like. So here's our Jumbotron with our image. Here's my menu items. Remember, if I click on Teams, it's going to say go to the Show Teams. Watch down here. Go to the Show Teams method in the team controller. Let's see what happens. Now in this case it says, I don't know what you're talking about. That model is a null reference. It's never been set. That means, I'm going to click on that button to close it. That means that we're trying to use a model in this view, but we have never passed it that list of models. So if you come back to the controller and look right here, if you notice, we never passed it the list of models. We didn't pass it anything. So if I said, take that list and pass it, take that list and pass it to the view, it will now pass that list of model objects for Teams and put it into here, and now it will display. So if you ever see model and a null object reference, that means you never pass the model to the view. And all you do is you pass it as a parameter. You say return view and pass it as a parameter. Let's go back to the index.cs.html, save it. Let's run one more time and see how it looks now. And it displays our Jumbotron with our image, and it's going to display our menu, and we're going to click on the Teams, which now takes us to the Show Teams method in the Teams controller and shows this view. This is the Show Teams view. We can change that name and make it look nicer. There's that action link to create new. Here's the heading for team_code and the heading for team_name. Now those are sort of ugly titles. We probably could have changed our model and done a display for. You'll see that when we work with players. It didn't display any data yet, but that's because we don't have any teams associated with our show teams yet. So let's go create another method in our Teams controller. And this method is going to allow us to add teams to this list team variable, and then every time we will come back to the show teams method. So let's go ahead and write the methods to allow us to add a team object to the list of teams. So the first thing I need to do is in my team controller, I want to write a public method with an action result called add teams. We'll do an add team singular, not plural. And we want to say return view. And then we want this one with the semicolon. We want this to be an HTML form that allows us to create an object and add it to our list for Teams. But this is what we call an HTTP GET. In fact, I could even do this, square bracket, HTTP GET, and this annotation for this method says this add team method goes out to the server and gets something and returns it back to the client browsers. That's what that return view and the HTTP GET says. Go to the server and return the view from the server to the client. So let's go to this method and right mouse click, and we'll do an add view. And we actually want this to be a create template, and we want to use the team model and click add. Make sure layout page is checked. Click add. This creates a brand new view for us, and in this view it uses Razor and says I'm going to do an HTML begin form tag. So I don't have to write all the HTML code to do an HTML form. It does it for me. This next statement says let's go ahead and prevent cross-site scripting. And what will happen is it's going to go ahead and when a user visits our web page, it's going to make a token on the user's web page, and then it's going to make one on our server, and so that when the user tries to do something, we're going to make sure that the user is who they say they are and the one we've been communicating with, so that hackers can't get in and do things to their website. So we like that. That provides security for our website. This says keep track of any validation errors that might occur in the model on this form. If you have an error, then it's going to go ahead and display that error message in red on the form. This says go create a label for the team code. from the model and throw an HTML attribute on it using the class control label. This one says, now go create an edit area for the team code and add a validation model for the team code if there's one from that model. So remember in the model when we did our validations like required or string length, these messages, the validation for and the validation summary, are the ones that will actually help display error messages if the user is making mistakes. And it does this for each of the objects from our model and just displays all that, creates all that HTML code for you. It even creates a submit button for us that has the word create, but I'm going to change that word to be add team on that button. And then there's another link on there that says back to the list. It goes to the index method in the team controller. But remember, we didn't do the index method. Our controller was called show teams. That's the controller, right? Here's our controller right here. Show teams, and there's the method show teams. So instead of sending it back to the index method, we want to send it to the show teams method. And it will automatically go to the show or the teams controller because that's the controller we're currently working with. Here's the add team view that we're working with right now, right? It's in the teams folder in the views folder. Since it's in the teams folder, it knows to work with the teams controller. It makes this magical link that the folder name here will match the controller name up here. So that's why we want to send it back to show teams and not back to the list. Or we could add another action link, and let's do that. Let's add one more action link there. But in the other action link that we just wanted to add down here at the bottom, we're going to say, let's send it back to the home by calling the index method in the home controller. And by the way, in between here, let's go ahead and do a break. But so we're going to have two different links on there now. Back over here, we have our add team get controller, which we'll call our add team view, which will be right here. This will be our HTML form. And at the bottom of the form, we have back to the list, which will go to the show teams method in the current controller, which is teams. Or we could say back to home, which will say go to the index method in the home controller. So let's go ahead and go back to our index page and let's start the application. And it will run it for us. And here's our landing page with our Jumbotron. Here's Teams, which says go to the show teams method. And here's our show teams method. Now, if we want to get to add a new record, if I clicked on this right now, look down here at the bottom, it says go to the create method in the Teams controller. Click on it, error, because I don't have a Teams method. What I have instead in the show teams folder for create new, I have the create method. Let's do this. Let's modify this. Let's say add a new team. Remember, this is back in show teams. And instead of calling create, let's go to the add team method. And by default, that's going to be in the Teams controller. There it is right there, add team. So let's go back to index. Let's save. Run one more time. And here's our teams. Add a new team, which says go to the add team method. It shows our form. This would say go back to show team. Add new team. This would say go back to home. Go to teams. Add new team. I could add some type of code. There's a big long code and a team name. Add team. It says you got an error. You don't have an add team method. And I think to myself, yes, I do. It's right here in the team controller. There's the add team method. But that add team method is used for getting the data from the server and showing the view. We still need one more method that will actually post the data from that form. So let's go ahead and write that method. I'm just going to paste it because I already wrote it. And here's what it is. First of all, it's an HTTP post. And in that HTTP post means take data from the form and post it to the server. Send it to the server. Notice the method name. It's the same name as our get. And I can do that. I can overload the method, meaning I can add the same method with the same name as long as the parameters are different. This one doesn't have any parameters. This receives one parameter. I called it my team, and it's of type team. Now team is the model object over here. There's that team object. And remember, back over here on add team, the view, I said receive a team model object and use it in the view. So the team object is automatically passed here. We have an object associated with the view. And when we're all done, when you click the submit button, and that's for the add team, it will go try to find an add team method, the same name as the view, an add team method in the controller, but it wants to find a post method. And that's what we wrote here. A post method, same name as the view, and then it receives an object. This object is the object from the HTML form. That form acts as a container. And it works with the team model. And so when you click submit, it passes all the data from that HTML form to this post method and passes that data into that variable. You could call it anything you want, but it has to be of type team because that was the model associated with the view. Then we say, go check the state of the model. And so it checks all the validations on the model that we made. And it says, are they all valid? If not, then go back to the view, add team, and pass it the model object that I received from it. So it will fill in the data from the form that it was using before. If it is valid, then we say go to that list team right here, public static list team. Go to the list team, add a new object to it, and we add the object from the HTML form. Then we redirect to the index page, the index method in the home controller. This is a way we can send control to a different method in a different controller. Otherwise, we would just stay in the same controller. So let's see how this actually works. Let's go back to index. We'll run the express. We'll go to the Jumbotron. We'll click on Teams. There are no teams yet. Let's go to Add a New Team. Let's type in a big long number and a name. And it says the code must be at least 2 and at most 5. That came from our model. Remember that? Come back over to here. Let's look at the team model. And it said the minimum length for code has to be 2, the maximum is 5, and there's our error message. That was displayed because we said, is the model valid? And since it wasn't valid, it logged all the error messages to something out there in ASP.NET, and we sent control back to here, and it said, show me all the errors that you have. That's what validation summary did for us. So it showed us all the errors. Let's try not to enter anything and see what happens. Now we get the team code field is required, the name is required. Okay, well let's just give this a team name of UTA. That error message disappears. Now we have to type something here, Utah Jazz, add team, and it sent control back to here. Why? Because we said after we add an object to the team, let's go back to the index method in the home controller. This is the home controller index method. Let's click on Teams again. Oh look, there's Utah Jazz now. That's our new item we created. So that's how we can add a bunch of items to a list. Let's go ahead and close that. We'll come back over to here, and the next video will actually pick up from here, and it will show us how to edit a team object that is already there.